Imagine this. You leave your child in the care of someone you trust completely. A person the entire neighborhood praises as kind, dependable, and safe. You head to work, or run errands, feeling comforted that your little one is in good hands. But what if, behind closed doors, that trust is not just misplaced, it's shattered in the most horrifying way? This is not a story about strangers lurking in dark alleys. It's about someone who lived among them, smiled at block parties, waved hello from the front porch, and earned the reputation of being the perfect babysitter. Parents admired her, children seemed happy in her care, and for years she managed to blend in, carrying an image of innocence. But masks always slip. And in this story, when the truth was finally uncovered, it was worse than anyone could have imagined. Our story begins with Emily, a hard-working single mother who wanted nothing more than to provide a safe, happy life for her little boy, Noah. Like many parents, she struggled to balance work, bills, and time at home. Hiring a babysitter wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. And Claire, the babysitter she chose, came highly recommended. Other mothers praised her endlessly. "She's like family," they said. "The safest hands for your child." For Emily, it felt like an answer to prayer. But if there's one thing this story teaches us, it's that appearances deceive. Over the weeks, subtle changes began to creep into Emily's home. Noah, once cheerful and playful, became quiet. He started clinging to his mother at night, whispering he didn't want to be left alone. At first, Emily chalked it up to a bad dream, or maybe the adjustment of growing up. Children go through phases, after all. But something deeper was shifting. His laughter faded. His eyes seemed fearful. He stopped talking about his days with Claire. And when her name was mentioned, his little shoulders tensed. A mother's instinct is powerful. Emily felt it rising inside her, gnawing at her peace. But when she expressed her worries to friends, the response was always the same: "You're overthinking. Claire's the best. Don't be paranoid." And for a while, Emily tried to believe them. She tried to convince herself she was just tired, stressed, imagining things. But that feeling wouldn't leave. This is the moment where every parent asks themselves, do I trust the world around me, or do I trust my gut? Emily chose her gut. And that decision would uncover a nightmare hiding in plain sight. One night, after Noah had finally fallen asleep, Emily sat in the living room scrolling through her phone, restless. She couldn't shake the image of her son's frightened eyes. That's when the idea struck her. If no one believed her, if everyone thought she was paranoid, she needed proof. She ordered a small nanny cam, disguised as a toy that could sit quietly in Noah's room. She prayed she was wrong. She prayed she'd feel silly later for doubting Claire. But deep down, she already knew. What the camera revealed would break her heart. This story isn't just about crime. It's about betrayal at the deepest level, betrayal of trust, betrayal of innocence, betrayal of a mother's faith in her community. And as we unfold what Emily discovered, you will see how one hidden predator was finally exposed, not by chance, but by a mother's relentless courage to protect her child. This is A Neura Beat. Real stories. Real betrayal. Real justice. Stay with us. Emily remembered the first time she met Claire. It was at a neighborhood barbecue, the kind of gathering where everyone brings a dish and children run barefoot across the lawn. Claire was smiling, chatting easily, holding a baby on her hip as if she'd done it her whole life. Parents flocked to her, some asking if she was available for weekends, others joking that she should open her own daycare. She had that glow, that calmness that made people relax around her. For Emily, who had just started a demanding job and was searching for someone to watch Noah after school, Claire seemed perfect. She was young but responsible, patient yet firm. Most importantly, she came recommended by almost every parent on the block. "She's the kind of sitter you dream about," one mother had told Emily. And when Claire offered to meet Noah, the little boy seemed shy but cooperative. He let her read him a picture book, and even gave her a small smile before bedtime. To a tired single mom desperate for stability, this felt like a blessing. Emily could finally breathe. With Claire, she thought, Noah was safe. In the weeks that followed, everything appeared normal. Emily would drop Noah off at home, Claire would greet them with her warm grin, and neighbors would often wave and say, "Oh, you're so lucky to have her." There were no red flags, no obvious warning signs. On the surface, life was working exactly as it should. But little cracks began to show, tiny details only a mother might notice. At dinner, when Emily asked about his day, Noah grew quiet. He didn't chatter the way he used to. At bedtime, he asked her to leave the light on. One evening, when she mentioned Claire's name casually, Noah pushed his plate away and stared at the floor. His small hand clutched his toy soldier until his knuckles turned white. Emily's heart sank. She tried to brush it off, kids are complicated, after all. But the unease grew heavier with each passing day. The hardest part was the response she received when she voiced her concerns. At a coffee meetup with other moms, Emily nervously admitted, "I don't know, something feels off. Noah's been acting strange around Claire." Laughter broke the tension. "Oh, Emily," one mother said kindly, "you're overthinking. Claire is an angel. Honestly, you're lucky to have her." Another added, "Children go through moods. It's not the babysitter." Even her closest friend suggested she might just be stressed. "You've got a lot on your plate." So Emily nodded, smiled, pretended to accept their reassurance. But inside, her instincts screamed louder. Still, how could she argue against an entire neighborhood's trust? How could she accuse someone who had never shown a single crack in her public image? The thought terrified her. What if she was wrong? What if she was unfairly judging a woman who had done nothing but help? But every time Noah clung to her legs and whispered, "Don't go, Mama," Emily felt the truth pressing in. A trusted babysitter. A beloved figure. And a child who seemed to wither under her care. The stage was set. The mask would soon fall. And Emily's world was about to change forever. The glow of the laptop screen flickered faintly in the dimly lit room, the camera rolling as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. He spoke calmly to his subscribers, convincing them that curiosity was harmless, that the dark web was simply another corner of the internet waiting to be explored. His words carried the excitement of adventure, an invitation to witness something hidden from the world. Viewers leaned in, eager to see the forbidden. With a few keystrokes, the Tor browser opened, and a labyrinth of anonymous markets, strange forums, and encrypted links appeared on his screen. At first, it seemed like a game, a daring exploration into the unknown. But as the minutes passed, the tone shifted. He stumbled upon disturbing sites where money bought not goods, but lives. There were listings that made his chest tighten, prices attached to organs, each presented like items in an online store. A human kidney, a liver, a cornea, each described in cold, transactional language. It wasn't a movie, not a myth, but a digital catalogue of real suffering. He scrolled further, his hand trembling on the mouse, trying to convince himself that it was staged, some elaborate scam to frighten thrill-seekers. Yet the silence of the room, broken only by the hum of the laptop fan, made the reality sink in deeper. This wasn't entertainment. This was a marketplace built on human despair. The chat window buzzed as his viewers typed comments, some laughing, some daring him to go deeper, others begging him to stop. The lines blurred between their morbid curiosity and his growing fear. His heart raced as he realized he had gone too far, yet he couldn't look away. Each new click revealed another layer of horror, stories of people disappearing, whispers in forums about children being taken, organs sold to the highest bidder. His breath grew shallow, the weight of the crime pressing against his chest. For a moment, the camera captured his face as the bravado drained from his expression. The thrill of exposing secrets turned into the dread of knowing too much. His audience had expected excitement, but what they witnessed was the unraveling of a man staring at something that should never be seen. He closed the browser suddenly, his hands shaky, the screen going black. Silence filled the stream. His subscribers had been expecting a show, but instead, they saw fear, a raw, unfiltered realization that the dark web was not just a digital frontier, but a mirror reflecting the darkest side of humanity. The video ended abruptly, leaving viewers unsettled. They had tuned in for adventure, but what they got was a glimpse into a nightmare. A secret that once revealed could not be unseen, a memory that would haunt both the man behind the camera and those who watched along. She thought she had finally found balance. Work, parenting, and the little moments in between were finally starting to align. Emily had begun to smile more, her son Noah seemed safe and happy, and the presence of Claire, the babysitter she trusted, felt like a blessing. On the surface, life appeared calm. But as in many stories of betrayal, the cracks began quietly, almost invisibly. It started with Noah's silence. A boy once full of laughter and questions suddenly grew withdrawn. Emily noticed him clutching his toy tighter at night, his eyes wide open in the dark. Sometimes she would catch him flinching when Claire entered the room, but she told herself maybe it was just a phase, or perhaps Noah was overtired. The mother in her heart felt a storm brewing, but the mind desperate for stability, kept dismissing the signs. Claire played her role flawlessly. Smiles, gentle words, the perfect mask of innocence. She would update Emily daily, sending cheerful messages and assuring her everything was fine. But Noah's silence deepened. His drawings at school became darker, scribbles of figures that loomed large, shadows that seemed to chase a small child drawn in the corner of the paper. His teacher raised a concern, but Emily, torn between trust in Claire and the unsettling hints, found herself caught in confusion. One evening, while tucking Noah into bed, Emily asked him softly, "Are you okay, sweetheart? Did something happen?" His small hands tightened into fists, and tears welled in his eyes. But no words came out. Just silence. Silence that screamed louder than any confession. That night, Emily lay awake, questions gnawing at her. Was she imagining things? Or was the person she trusted most with her child hiding something unspeakable? The unease was no longer avoidable. A mother's instinct had been triggered, and once that fire begins to burn, it doesn't go out. Emily decided she would start paying closer attention, watching carefully, listening to the unspoken words her child couldn't yet form. What she would uncover was darker than she could ever imagine. The following week, Emily began to notice moments she had previously overlooked. Claire would often close the door to Noah's room when she was supposed to be reading him bedtime stories. When Emily asked why, Claire brushed it off with a laugh, saying, "He sleeps better without distractions." It sounded reasonable, but the way Noah's little hands trembled whenever she mentioned bedtime gnawed at Emily's heart. One afternoon, Emily came home earlier than expected. She moved quietly through the hallway, her footsteps light against the wooden floor. As she approached Noah's room, she heard Claire's voice, soft, but sharp in tone, nothing like the gentle babysitter persona she always displayed in front of Emily. Her words were laced with threats, warnings whispered into a child's fragile ears. Emily froze, her chest tightening. She wanted to burst in, but fear of what she might find held her back. Moments later, Noah emerged from the room. His eyes were red, his face pale. When he saw his mother standing in the hallway, his lips parted as if to speak, but then he quickly looked down. Claire followed, smiling as if nothing had happened. "He just had a little tantrum," she said smoothly. Emily forced a smile back, but inside, her world was beginning to fracture. That night, Emily sat alone, replaying every moment in her head. The odd silences, the drawings, the way Noah clung to her whenever Claire was around. She realized she could no longer ignore the signs. Something terrible was happening right under her roof. So she made a decision. No more second-guessing. No more giving Claire the benefit of the doubt. Emily would set a trap, a way to catch the truth when no one else was watching. She bought a small recording device and placed it carefully in Noah's room, hidden among his toys. It was a desperate act of a mother who could no longer rely on trust, only on proof. The next day, as she left for work, Emily's heart pounded. She hated herself for leaving Noah again, but she knew the truth was about to surface. That evening, when she returned, she retrieved the recorder. Hands trembling, she pressed play. The sounds that filled the room shattered her. Noah's soft voice pleading. Claire's cold, cruel words. And then, the unmistakable proof of abuse. Emily dropped the device, tears streaming down her face, rage burning in her chest. The woman she had trusted with her child was a monster. Emily sat at the kitchen table long after Noah had gone to sleep, the recording still echoing in her mind. Every cruel word, every broken whimper from her son burned into her memory. She felt sick, but alongside the grief was something else, an unshakable fire. She could no longer rely on suspicions. Now she had proof. The next morning, she dropped Noah off at her sister's house under the pretense of needing extra help. She couldn't bear to leave him with Claire again, not for a second. Claire showed up at the door, smiling as usual, her voice sweet like honey, asking where Noah was. Emily lied with a calmness she didn't know she had, saying he was feeling unwell and resting at his aunt's place. Claire accepted the excuse, though Emily caught a flicker of something annoyance, maybe even anger, flashing across her eyes. That was when Emily realized something chilling. Claire wasn't just cruel in moments of stress. This wasn't a babysitter losing patience. It was calculated. Hidden. A mask she wore for everyone else. And Emily was going to be the one to pull that mask off. That night, Emily upgraded her plan. A hidden nanny cam, small, discreet, placed high in the corner of Noah's room. This time, not just sound, but undeniable video evidence. She told herself she was doing this for Noah, but part of her knew it was also for herself. To silence the voices in the neighborhood, the whispers that she was paranoid, the doubts that maybe she was imagining things. Days passed. Emily pretended everything was normal, smiling at Claire, thanking her, keeping her voice even. But inside, she was unraveling. Each night, after putting Noah to bed, she sat in front of her laptop, watching the recordings. The first night, nothing. Claire read him a story, tucked him in, and left. The second night, the same. But on the third, Emily's stomach turned to ice. She watched as Claire closed the bedroom door and her demeanor shifted like a shadow passing over her face. Her smile vanished, her eyes hardened. She leaned over Noah, her words sharp, her movements intimidating. She wasn't hitting him, at least not on camera, but the psychological torment was undeniable. Claire threatened him, made him repeat cruel phrases, belittled him until he cried himself to sleep. Emily slammed the laptop shut, her hands shaking. This was it. No one could call her paranoid anymore. No one could deny what was happening. She had the truth, captured in pixels and sound. But then came the hardest question: what now? Should she call the police immediately? Should she confront Claire herself? Should she expose her to the whole neighborhood, the same people who had once told her she was imagining things? Emily stared at Noah's sleeping face, the way he clutched his stuffed bear tightly to his chest, and she made her decision. She would fight. Not just for her child, but for every parent who had ever been dismissed, every child who had been silenced. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat in the living room, staring at the faint glow of the nanny cam footage replaying on her laptop. Every second of it carved into her like a blade. By morning, her exhaustion had hardened into resolve. She knew what she had to do: take this evidence beyond the walls of her home. The next day, she made her first stop at the police station. Sitting in the waiting area, she felt the weight of the stares from officers and staff. When her turn came, she explained everything, her voice trembling but firm. She showed them the recordings, each clip more damning than the last. The officer leaned forward, his expression tightening as he watched. He didn't dismiss her. He didn't call her paranoid. He nodded slowly, grimly, and promised this would be taken seriously. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt like she wasn't fighting alone. But the path wasn't simple. The police needed more. They told her to keep collecting evidence while they built a case. It felt unbearable, knowing Claire might still walk free, smiling that false smile, fooling everyone. Emily hated the thought, but she understood, rushing could risk justice. Back at home, Emily confided in her sister. Tears fell as she replayed the footage. Her sister hugged her tightly and whispered, "You're stronger than you think, Em. Noah's lucky to have you." Those words gave Emily strength, but they also fueled her anger. Because Claire had counted on her silence. Counted on everyone ignoring the signs. That silence ended here. Over the next week, Emily doubled down. She hid cameras in multiple rooms, carefully disguised, capturing every interaction. Claire, oblivious, carried on with her dual life. On camera, her true nature leaked out: cruelty, manipulation, even subtle gaslighting. Off camera, she maintained her polished, trustworthy mask for the neighborhood. The footage became impossible to deny. Emily compiled everything: a timeline of abuse, a digital archive of betrayal. One evening, she sat at her desk, staring at the growing collection of files. Her chest ached, but her determination only deepened. She whispered to herself, "This ends with me." And in that moment, she decided it wasn't just about turning Claire over to the police. It was about making sure everyone, her neighbors, the community, anyone who had dismissed her, saw who Claire really was. Before Emily could make her move, Claire texted her late at night, "Hope Noah's doing better. He's such a sweet boy. You know I'd do anything for him." The words chilled Emily. They read like kindness, but now she understood the poison beneath them. Emily stared at the message, her fists tightening. The mask was slipping, and she was ready to tear it off completely. Emily decided the time for silence was over. She had spent weeks gathering evidence, watching her son suffer, and pretending in front of a predator who smiled in her face. Now, she was ready to strike, but carefully. The next morning, she greeted Claire at the door as if nothing had changed. "Thanks again for everything," Emily said with a soft smile, masking the storm in her chest. Claire returned the smile, stepping inside with her usual confident air. But Emily noticed how Noah instinctively moved behind her leg, his little hands clutching at her dress. That subtle flinch was all the reminder she needed of why she was doing this. Instead of leaving for work, Emily stayed home, pretending she had a day off. She lingered in the kitchen, casually watching, every movement recorded by the hidden cameras. Claire adjusted quickly, slipping into her caretaker role, reading Noah a story in her sweet voice. Emily wanted to scream at her right then, but she held back. Patience was her weapon now. Later that evening, Emily reached out to a couple of close friends and neighbors. She invited them for coffee, casually mentioning she had something important to show. They were the same people who had once dismissed her concerns, telling her she was imagining things, that Claire was too good, too kind, too trusted. When they arrived, Emily hesitated only for a second before pressing play. The living room filled with the sickening sound of Claire's harsh whispers, Noah's sobs, and the footage of her towering over him with calculated cruelty. Her friends froze, their faces shifting from disbelief to horror. One of them covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God, we trusted her with our kids." Emily let the silence linger, the truth sinking in. She spoke evenly, her voice steady. "This is who she really is. Not the smiling babysitter you think you know. This is what she does when no one's watching." Word began to spread quickly. The neighborhood that once praised Claire now buzzed with whispers of betrayal. Parents who once left their children in her care began pulling away, their trust shattered. Claire could feel it, the shift in the air, the way people looked at her differently. One evening, Emily finally confronted her directly. She didn't raise her voice, didn't cry. She simply looked Claire in the eye and said, "I know what you've done. And so will everyone else." For a brief moment, Claire's mask slipped. Her smile faltered, her eyes cold and sharp, the predator revealed. Then she tried to recover, but it was too late. Emily had seen it. The world was beginning to see it too. The trap was closing, and Claire knew her time was running out. Claire didn't like the shift she felt around her. Parents no longer waved as warmly when she passed. Playdates she once arranged were suddenly rescheduled. She felt the walls closing in, and in her mind, there was only one explanation: Emily. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and shadows filled the house, Claire cornered Emily in the kitchen. Her tone was low, her words coated with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been saying things, haven't you? Turning people against me." Emily stayed calm, her heartbeat hammering in her chest, but her face steady. "I haven't said anything that isn't true, Claire. They're starting to see you for who you really are." For the first time, the mask completely fell away. Claire's eyes turned cold, sharp with anger. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're ruining my life. Everything I've built here." Her voice cracked, not with guilt, but with fury at losing control. Emily met her stare. "And what about Noah's life? What about what you did to him?" That moment, the air between them thickened, as if the entire house was holding its breath. Claire leaned closer, her whisper a venomous hiss. "You think people will believe you? I've been here for years. Trusted. Loved. You're just a desperate mother looking for someone to blame. But Emily was ready. She picked up her phone from the counter and pressed play. The audio from the hidden camera filled the kitchen, Claire's cruel words, Noah's quiet sobs. Claire's face went pale, her mouth opening, then shutting again, caught in her own poison. You don't have to believe me, Emily said softly. The truth speaks for itself. Claire stepped back, her false confidence unraveling. For the first time, Emily saw something almost like fear flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, never guilt, but the realization that her carefully constructed facade was crumbling. Before leaving that night, Claire turned at the door, her voice sharp and trembling. You'll regret this, Emily. You've started something you can't stop. Emily closed the door behind her and locked it, her body shaking. She knew Claire wouldn't go quietly. The confrontation had only just begun, but Emily had no intention of backing down. The following days felt like living in a storm. Claire didn't disappear quietly, she doubled down. She smiled wider at the neighbors, offered free babysitting to parents, and even baked cookies for the local church group, painting herself as the picture of innocence. To anyone who didn't know the truth, it was convincing. But Emily could see the desperation behind it, the frantic need to maintain control. Then the rumors began. A neighbor casually mentioned to Emily that Claire had been saying she was emotionally unstable, that her paranoia was clouding her judgment as a mother. Someone else hinted Claire suggested Emily was overworked, maybe even imagining things. It was Claire's final weapon, turning suspicion back on Emily. For a moment, Emily felt the ground slip beneath her. What if people believed Claire's lies? What if the police hesitated because of her manipulations? Doubt crept in, whispering the same cruel question Claire had asked in the kitchen. Who will believe you? But then she remembered Noah's drawings. His shaking hands. His whispered pleas on the recordings. That was her anchor. She wasn't fighting for her reputation, she was fighting for her child. Emily gathered everything, videos, audio, timestamps, even her journal where she had written down every suspicious moment. She built a case so thorough it couldn't be brushed aside. One night, sitting at her desk with files spread across the table, she hit record on her phone and spoke directly, her voice steady. My name is Emily. And this is the truth of what happened in my home. The truth of what Claire did. She uploaded the video privately, sending it first to the detective handling her case, then sharing snippets with the parents who had once trusted Claire. It wasn't about social media drama, it was about making sure no one could look away anymore. The ripple was immediate. Parents stopped defending Claire. The neighborhood that once dismissed Emily began to whisper a different story. Maybe she was right all along. Maybe we ignored the signs. That week, the police called her back in. They had seen enough. With Emily's evidence, they were ready to move. Emily hung up the phone, tears brimming in her eyes. This wasn't the end yet, but for the first time, she felt the tide turning. Claire's mask was slipping in public, and the law was finally catching up. The knock on Claire's door came early in the morning, just as the neighborhood was waking up. 2 police officers stood waiting, their presence calm but firm. Claire, still in her robe, opened the door with a practiced smile that faltered the moment she saw the badges. Claire Mitchell, one of the officers asked. Yes, she replied, her voice wavering slightly. You're under investigation. We need you to come with us. Gasps echoed from across the street. Neighbors peered through curtains and stepped onto porches, watching as the woman they had trusted for years was escorted out in handcuffs. Claire tried to protest, her voice sharp and desperate. This is a mistake. I've cared for your children, all of them. Ask anyone, I'm the best sitter in this neighborhood. But the words fell flat. No one moved to defend her. Emily stood at her window, watching. Her hands shook, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to run outside, to scream at Claire, to demand answers for every tear Noah had cried. But instead, she stayed still. She didn't need to say anything. The truth was speaking louder than she ever could. Later that day, Emily sat with the detective who had handled her case. He explained the next steps, formal charges, interviews, court proceedings. It would take time, but Claire would no longer be free to harm Noah or anyone else's child. Emily nodded, relief and exhaustion mixing in her chest. Still, Victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt heavy. Noah was safe, yes, but he was also scarred. At bedtime, when Emily tucked him in, he whispered, "She can't come back, right, Mommy?" Emily kissed his forehead and held him close. "No, sweetheart. She'll never hurt you again." But she knew healing wasn't instant. Trust, once broken, didn't snap back easily. She resolved to give Noah patience, love, and the security he needed. And she promised herself one more thing: Claire would never silence another child. Across the neighborhood, whispers continued. Parents who once rolled their eyes at Emily's concerns now looked at her with new respect, even guilt. Some avoided her gaze, ashamed for not believing sooner. Others reached out quietly, thanking her for her courage. The predator who had hidden in plain sight was finally unmasked. But Emily understood this wasn't just about Claire. It was about listening when a child cries, when a mother insists something is wrong, even if the truth is uncomfortable. The courthouse was colder than Emily expected, not in temperature but in atmosphere. The walls seemed to hum with tension, every bench filled with neighbors, parents, and curious strangers who had followed the story as it spread through whispers and headlines. The trusted babysitter case had become a local scandal, and everyone wanted to see the truth laid bare. Claire entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, wrists bound, her once practiced smile completely gone. She looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence. The mask had shattered, and all that remained was the predator beneath it. Still, when her eyes locked on Emily, there was no remorse. Only cold hatred, a silent promise that if she ever had the chance, she'd make Emily pay. Emily sat in the front row, Noah safely at home with her sister. Her heart raced as she listened to the lawyers speak. The defense tried to paint Claire as misunderstood, a caretaker under stress. They said Emily had misinterpreted, that the recordings were taken out of context. But then came the evidence. The videos. The audio. The sound of Claire's venom-laced threats, the sight of Noah's trembling body. The courtroom shifted. Gasps filled the air, some parents covering their mouths, tears welling up in their eyes. Emily was called to the stand. Her hands shook as she raised her right hand, swearing to tell the truth. She looked at the jury, then at the judge, and finally at the rows of faces watching her. Her voice cracked at first, but then it grew stronger as she told the story: how Noah changed, how no one believed her, how she fought to uncover the truth. She spoke not just as a mother, but as a fighter for every parent who had been ignored. When she finished, silence filled the room. For a moment, it felt as though the world was holding its breath. Then the prosecutor played the final clip, Claire's voice, sharp as a knife, hissing threats into the darkness of Noah's room. The jury members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. There was no denying it anymore. During a recess, a few neighbors approached Emily quietly. One whispered, "I'm sorry we didn't believe you. You saved not just your son, but all of ours." Emily nodded, her throat too tight to answer. She hadn't done this for their apologies. She'd done it for Noah. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear. Guilty. Multiple counts of child abuse, endangerment, and psychological harm. Claire's sentence would ensure she would never again be free to prey on children. Emily exhaled, her body trembling with relief. The battle had been long, and the scars would remain, but justice had been served. When the gavel came down, it should have felt like the end. But for Emily, it was only the beginning of another kind of journey, the long road of healing. In the weeks after the trial, the neighborhood buzzed with conversations. Parents who once praised Claire now whispered about how they always felt something was off. Others admitted their shame, that they ignored Emily's warnings, that they dismissed Noah's quiet cries. Some avoided Emily entirely, too embarrassed to face her. But Emily wasn't interested in gossip. Her focus was Noah. At home, things were fragile. Noah still woke up crying some nights, his little body trembling as he asked if Claire would come back. Emily reassured him again and again, rocking him gently, whispering, "You're safe now. She can't hurt you anymore." Slowly, the fear in his eyes began to fade, replaced with the tentative spark of the boy he used to be. Emily also began attending therapy sessions with Noah, learning how to help him rebuild his trust and sense of safety. The sessions weren't easy, sometimes they both cried more than they spoke, but they were healing, brick by brick. One evening, Emily decided to record a message, not just for herself but for others. Sitting in front of her camera, she spoke plainly. "I never thought this could happen to me. I trusted someone the whole neighborhood trusted. And I was told I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't. And my son paid the price. If you're a parent, trust your instincts. Listen to your child. Don't let anyone silence you." She uploaded the video to a community forum and to a small parenting group online. To her surprise, it spread quickly. Messages poured in from mothers and fathers across the country, some thanking her for her courage, others sharing their own stories of betrayal and warning signs ignored. Emily realized then that her fight wasn't just for Noah anymore. Her voice was now a lifeline for others. In the middle of one of those videos, she added, "This is not just my story, it's a warning, a call to action. And if you want more stories like this, more truths uncovered, follow and support AI Neurobeat. Because sometimes, storytelling can save lives." The channel became not just a place for entertainment, but for awareness, where stories of betrayal, survival, and justice reached people who needed to hear them. Emily knew scars remained. She knew Noah's laughter would take time to return fully. But every time she tucked him into bed and saw him drift into sleep without fear, she felt strength return. Justice had been served, but more importantly, trust had been rebuilt slowly, carefully, like dawn breaking after a long, dark night. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of the mother's life. The babysitter had been arrested, but the legal battle was far from over. She found herself spending long hours in courtrooms, facing a wall of lawyers who tried to twist the narrative, making it seem as though she was exaggerating or misinterpreting events. Every court date was emotionally draining, each one a reminder of the trauma her child had suffered. But she refused to back down. She had already fought too hard, endured too much, to let anyone silence her. Her daughter, though still young, was beginning the long process of healing. Therapy sessions became a regular part of their lives. At first, the little girl was hesitant, too frightened to speak about what had happened. But slowly, with the patient guidance of a child psychologist, she began to open up. She spoke in small pieces, fragments of memories that were painful but necessary to confront. The mother listened to every word, offering comfort and reassurance, vowing silently that she would never let anyone hurt her child again. Outside the courtroom, the mother's story began to spread. Local media picked it up, shining a light on the dangers that often go unnoticed in seemingly safe environments. Strangers reached out with messages of support, sharing their own stories of betrayal and abuse. It created a ripple effect, a community of survivors who were finally finding the courage to speak up. What had once felt like a lonely battle was now part of something bigger, a movement to protect children and hold predators accountable. The babysitter, once trusted by so many families, now stood exposed. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now looked away in shame or anger. Parents who had once considered hiring her were horrified by the truth. The mask of innocence she had worn for so long was gone, replaced by the image of someone capable of causing unimaginable harm. For the mother, justice wasn't just about seeing her behind bars, it was about making sure no other child would suffer the same fate. She pushed for stricter background checks, stronger legal protections, and more awareness campaigns. She spoke at community events, telling her story not because she wanted pity, but because she wanted change. Her voice, once quiet and uncertain, had become powerful and unshakable. But even as she fought for justice, she never forgot the personal side of the battle. Every night, she tucked her daughter into bed, holding her close, whispering words of love and safety. She knew that healing would take time, that scars don't vanish overnight. Yet she also knew that they were stronger now, bound together by resilience, by survival, and by an unbreakable bond that no betrayal could destroy. And in that quiet strength, the story found its final truth. Evil can hide in plain sight, but it can never withstand the light of truth. The babysitter had taken so much from them. But she had not won. In exposing her, the mother had reclaimed power not only for herself and her daughter but for every family who had ever lived in fear of the shadows within their own homes. The courtroom was packed. Every seat taken, the air thick with whispers and the weight of expectation. On one side sat Claire, dressed in muted colors, her face carefully composed, her lawyer at her side painting her as the victim of a witch hunt. On the other side, Emily sat with her attorney, her hands trembling but her jaw set. The world had shrunk into this single room, and the stakes had never been higher. The prosecutor stood first, presenting the hidden nanny cam footage frame by frame. Gasps filled the room as Claire's actions were laid bare for all to see. But the defense was quick to counter, claiming the footage was misleading, out of context, even staged. They brought up Emily's paranoia, neighbors who insisted Claire was trustworthy, and the idea that a stressed single mother had fabricated accusations. It was a brutal tug-of-war, the kind that makes even the most confident juror hesitate. Emily's heart pounded as witnesses stepped up, some in her favor, others against. The defense lawyer pressed hard, suggesting Emily had exaggerated Noah's fear, even implying her own instability made her see abuse where none existed. Each word cut deep, but Emily stayed strong, gripping the table, silently reminding herself that she wasn't here for pride, she was here for Noah. Then came the expert testimony. A child psychologist, calm but firm, explained the changes in Noah's behavior, the withdrawal, the fear, the nightmares. The patterns were consistent, the psychologist said, with children who had endured emotional and physical manipulation. It wasn't sensational, it was scientific. The defense tried to poke holes, but the steady, undeniable professionalism of the expert silenced the courtroom more effectively than any dramatic statement could. Claire finally took the stand. She spoke with practiced tears, her voice breaking at the right moments, insisting she loved Noah like her own. She accused Emily of turning the boy against her out of jealousy, painting herself as the scapegoat of a bitter mother's imagination. Some in the room shifted uncomfortably, her performance was convincing. But then the cross-examination began. The prosecutor confronted her with contradictions, messages to other families, subtle slips in her story. Each question chipped away at the mask, until cracks began to show. The tension was unbearable. Emily's attorney made the closing statement, not with theatrics but with quiet conviction. This is not about paranoia. This is not about misunderstanding. This is about a mother who trusted the wrong person, and a child who paid the price. Today, you can give that child his voice back. The jury filed out. Hours dragged. Every tick of the clock stretched like an eternity. Emily sat frozen, staring at the floor, praying silently. Claire sat upright, unshaken on the outside, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. When the jury returned, the room fell into silence. The foreperson stood, voice steady but heavy. We find the defendant guilty. The words sliced through the air. Emily gasped, tears spilling freely, her body shaking as relief washed over her. Claire's mask finally shattered, her composure collapsing as officers moved to take her into custody. The courtroom erupted, some gasping, some whispering, others breaking into tears. For Emily, it was over. For Noah, justice had begun. The courthouse steps were bathed in golden evening light when Emily finally walked out, Noah's small hand wrapped in hers. The crowd outside was restless, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, but to her it all felt like a distant echo. The verdict had been delivered, justice declared. And yet, she knew this was not the end of her journey. Healing for Noah would take time, patience, and love. Justice, after all, is only the first step, it does not erase scars. Inside their quiet home, Emily watched her son play with his toys again, his laughter returning in fragile bursts. The shadows in his eyes had not fully lifted, but there was light now where once there was only fear. Emily sat back and breathed, her heart full of a fragile hope. She had fought, she had endured, and for Noah's sake, she had won. The narrator's voice softened, shifting from the courtroom tension to a more personal truth. Stories like this remind us that evil does not always wear a stranger's face, it can hide behind trust, behind smiles, behind the people we think we know. This case isn't just about one mother or one child. It is a reminder for every parent, every family, that vigilance is not paranoia when it comes to protecting those we love. The story ends with a quiet reflection. Claire will serve her sentence, her betrayal carved into history. Emily and Noah will walk forward together, carrying both wounds and strength. And the neighborhood, once blind to what was happening in their midst, will never look at trust the same way again. The narrator pauses, a deliberate moment of silence before closing. This was one story of betrayal, of justice, and of a mother's unyielding fight for her child. If you want to hear more stories that expose the hidden truths of trust, betrayal, and survival, subscribe to AI Neurobeat, where real stories come alive, and voices that were silenced are finally heard. With that, the screen fades, the case closed, leaving the audience both haunted and moved, knowing they've witnessed not just crime, but the resilience of love.